Quentin Somerville reports from Beijing.
A full day since the earthquake hit, and professional rescue teams have made it to Yushu. This was a hotel. Carefully, the men used listening equipment. It picks up the sound of survivors. It's bitterly cold, they have to work fast. First one survivor is brought out, then more, 4 in total. After a night under the rubble, they signal they're okay. The quake was so powerful that it almost wiped the town of Jega from the map. Most of the buildings were destroyed or damaged. And this is one of the remotest corners of China, high on the Tibetan plateau. The rescue workers are battling altitude sickness and freezing winds as they go about their work. But they are making progress. Here, the child is pulled from the rubble. The area's schools mostly collapsed, bringing back memories of the Sichuan earthquake of 2008, when thousands of children were killed as they sat at their desks. But the children here appear to be luckier.
The Sichuan earthquake happened at a time when all the children were at school. In the case of Wushu, the earthquake was at 10 to 8, and school begins in that county at 8:30. So for the children who go to school on a daily basis, they will have been at home or on their way to school, but not in school.
Tibetan monks are helping to find survivors. Their hillside monasteries have also been badly damaged. And from Beijing, Vice Prime Minister Hui Liangyu arrived to coordinate the efforts. China's communist government says nothing will be spared in the effort to help the victims. The Prime Minister, Wen Jiabao, has also arrived on the scene. Witnesses say the earthquake took away their lives. They've been left with nothing. The shock of the destruction is plain to see, but relief has arrived. Quentin Somerville, BBC News, Beijing.
As China grapples with natural disaster, its economy shows no sign of slowing down. Today it was announced that the country's growth rate was nearly 12% for the first quarter of this year, even greater than expected. It was the fastest rate of expansion since 2007, but it did raise some fears that China's economy could be overheating.
Rescue teams in northwestern China are battling freezing temperatures and high altitude in their efforts to find survivors of yesterday's earthquake. 600 people are now known to have died, and another 300 are still unaccounted for. Convoys of troops armed with supplies have travelled hundreds of miles through sleet and sandstorms to reach the remote mountainous Xinhai province. Quentin Somerville has an update from Beijing.
A full day since the earthquake hit, and professional rescue teams have made it to Yushu. This was a hotel. Carefully, the men used listening equipment. It picks up the sound of survivors. It's bitterly cold, they have to work fast. First one survivor is brought out, then more, 4 in total. After a night under the rubble, they signal they're okay. The quake was so powerful that it almost wiped the town of Jega from the map. Most of the buildings were destroyed or damaged. And this is one of the remotest corners of China, high on the Tibetan plateau. The rescue workers are battling altitude sickness and freezing winds as they go about their work. But they are making progress. Here, the child is pulled from the rubble. The area's schools mostly collapsed, bringing back memories of the Sichuan earthquake of 2008, when thousands of children were killed as they sat at their desks. But the children here appear to be luckier.
The Sichuan earthquake happened at a time when all the children were at school. In the case of Wushu, the earthquake was at 10 to 8, and school begins in that county at 8:30. So for the children who go to school on a daily basis, they will have been at home or on their way to school, but not in school.
Tibetan monks are helping to find survivors. Their hillside monasteries have also been badly damaged. And from Beijing, Vice Prime Minister Hui Liangyu arrived to coordinate the efforts. China's communist government says nothing will be spared in the effort to help the victims. The Prime Minister, Wen Jiabao, has also arrived on the scene. Witnesses say the earthquake took away their lives. They've been left with nothing. The shock of the destruction is plain to see, but relief has arrived. Quentin Somerville, BBC News, Beijing.
Sometimes, in moments of desperation, enemies come together. It is happening right now in the earthquake zone in China, where Tibetan monks and Chinese government workers are digging side by side to try to rescue those still trapped in the rubble. 2 days after the devastating tremor which killed at least 1,100 people, authorities say tents, food and drinking water are urgently needed. The epicenter was close to the town of Daegu. It sits on the remote Tibetan plateau. From there, our correspondent Damien Grammaticus has sent us this report.
From the ruins of a hotel, an incredible moment. A girl who cheated death. Waiting relatives reached for her. She couldn't be more than 7 or 8 years old. She spent 2 days entombed alive.
Well, this little girl's rescue is one piece of incredible news, but the chance of anyone else being found alive under all this rubble are slim indeed.
Here, 12,000 feet above sea level, nighttime temperatures are bitter. So even though rescue teams have arrived, mostly they're finding only bodies. The people who live and died here are almost all Tibetans. Monks gather round to say prayers for each lost soul. As you drive through Daegu, you pass parts almost entirely level by Wednesday's quake.
It's here on the southern side of town where the devastation is worst. As far as the eye can see, homes reduced to just rubble. And this happened in seconds, because these are made of mud and stone, and those who lived here lost everything.
Some salvage what they can of their broken lives. Others just sit dazed and despondent, nowhere to go. And teams of monks with shovels wander the shattered streets. Laden lost her husband. Kunchok Chun saw her daughter. This police team was the first help Kunchok had had. Among the few things they dug out were family photos.
Who's this? This is your husband.
Her daughter Yanso was 12. Her body lies under the family's house.
I have lost so much. The pain is so great. What is the point of this kind of life?
Then, according to tradition in these barren, cold lands, monks carry the bodies to a nearby river. And following the ancient Tibetan practice, the dead are consigned to the frigid waters. Demi Grammaticus, BBC News, Yushu in Western China.
Tragic earthquake scenes that we have seen too many times this year.
The Dalai Lama has said he wants to visit the site of the earthquake in northwest China that's killed at least 1,100 people. The Tibetan spiritual leader was born in Qinghai province, where the earthquake struck, but hasn't set foot in China since a failed Tibetan uprising more than 50 years ago. Here's Quentin Somerville in Beijing.
For days, the monks of Daegu have been gathering bodies. High on the Tibetan plateau, they prepared the dead, the victims of this week's earthquake, in a final ceremony. Priests blessed those who died, men, women and children. More than 700 bodies were added to this funeral pyre. There were so many that a traditional ceremony was impossible. The dead of this town were cremated together.
The mass cremation is very special, as there are too many bodies of the earthquake victims, and we can't have sky burials for all of them at the same time. There are not enough vultures for all these bodies, so the bodies will become very dirty. It's not good for their souls to rest in peace.
These Buddhist monks are from neighbouring Sichuan province. They travelled here to lend a hand. Often at odds with their Han Chinese countrymen, this time they're working together.
For us monks, the most important thing is life. We have come here to help rescue people. So many people have died. We want to save the ones still living.
Their spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, wants to come and comfort the victims. It's a wish that China's communist government will never grant. Loved by the people here, he's hated by Beijing. His constant requests for more freedom for these remote and distinct people are always denied. But there are more pressing concerns for those who survived the quake. There's the pain of having lost everything. High in the Qinghai mountains, many have spent days without proper shelter in freezing conditions.
Life's difficult now. We don't have much food, and we're buying just a little bit each time. The shops are closed, and it's hard to buy food and bottled water.
My main problem is that we have no food or water, and we don't even have a tent. Also, I have suffered injuries during the earthquake, and I am now looking to treat them, so these are my problems now.
China has dispatched 10,000 troops, rescue workers and doctors to help here, but the scale of the devastation is so large that even that still hasn't been enough. Quentin Somerville, BBC News, Beijing.
The Chinese leader said saving lives remained the priority as rescue teams continue to pore over the rubble. More than 1,700 people are now known to have been killed. The BBC's Louise Hubble reports.
There is still hope here in Yegu. 4 days after the earthquake, people are still being pulled alive from the rubble. President Hu has cut short a trip to South America to encourage rescuers to keep working. We must treasure each life, he told them.
We will put our utmost effort to save trapped people. As long as there's a ray of hope, we will increase our effort by 100 times.
But the rescued are the lucky few. Over 1,700 have now died here. People may have basic shelter, food and water, but it's not easy to get supplies in. Because high in the mountains, this is a remote Tibetan plateau. More than 1,000 monks gathered on the hilltops to say prayers for the dead.
We are praying for their spirits. We hope that they will be able to free themselves and go on into the afterlife.
This is a region where the Dalai Lama was raised, and he's appealing to China to let him visit the disaster zone. It's an appeal unlikely to be granted after his campaign for Tibetan independence. In this traditional part of China, bodies are usually left to the elements and vultures. But here in Qinghai province, there are simply too many dead for that to happen. Louise Hubble, BBC News.
It's been 3 months now since Haiti was devastated by a massive earthquake which left hundreds of thousands of people dead and scores more homeless. It was a natural disaster which hit without warning. But what if something could be done to actually alert people before an earthquake strikes? Well, that's exactly what a scientist in California is trying to do, using volunteers and their laptops. From California, Rajesh Merchandani now reports.
In cutting-edge California, people are rarely without their computers. Maybe she's starting up the next Google. Maybe he's writing an Oscar-winning screenplay. Or maybe they're part of an earthquake early warning system.
This one is vertical motions, and then if I shake it the other way, you'll see.
This scientist wants to use something called an accelerometer that's built into many laptops. It's used to detect movement. She's out giving demonstrations, hoping to recruit 10,000 quake catchers.
A lot of laptops have accelerometers in them. Basically, if I drop my laptop on the ground, it's supposed to stop the hard drive and sort of save the computer. And so I figured that since there's already an accelerometer in there, we could use it to record earthquakes.
A lot of readings from one area distinguish an earthquake from a lesser jolt. Wow. As long as the computer's on, the software is sending data in real time back to a central server. The idea is when a big tremor strikes, thousands of laptop sensors can cheaply and instantly collect a lot of information. And if scientists can pinpoint quickly where an earthquake starts, they might be able to send out a warning to places further away. In Haiti in January, a few seconds warning might have given people vital time to get out of poorly constructed buildings. California has its own experience of earthquakes.
Gosh!
Scientists here carefully study what happens so buildings can be constructed to withstand the big quake they say is overdue. California has a network of high-tech sensors in undisturbed locations. They're expensive, and an early warning system here is years off.
This one's what we call a shake movie.
A leading seismologist says data from laptop sensors lacks detail, but can still help.
The more that we get Southern California to see that we are a seismically active community and we all have a role to play in being safer, the safer we're all going to be. So I think that just the social aspect of it would make it completely worth it, whatever the seismologic uses of it.
Hey there, can I show you this? Back at the cafe, people seem impressed.
It's California, come on. There's one big quake every 30 years or something, so it's important, I think.
That is brilliant, especially in a place like Southern California. This would come in very handy. I mean, we'd actually use it.
When it comes to understanding earthquakes, could future safety be based on today's popular technology? Rajesh Merchandani, BBC News in Los Angeles.